Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men could not put Humpty back together again. This is a very old children's rhyme, although the ideas that it has in it are actually not for children. And I suppose there are lots of ways to talk about what that metaphor is, but what it made me think about recently when I heard it is when you break an egg, as it says, you don't put it back together again, but it doesn't mean that you didn't get anything from it. You got a fried egg. You can make deviled eggs, or you can put that in a cake or whatever. And it also is better that way, because while it's in the egg, you can't really use all that good stuff. Okay? And the the part about the king's horses and the king's men is, those are the mechanisms of causing something to get fixed or work or, get better. But there's nothing that you can do with an egg that got broken. And it doesn't, and I'll talk about more about how that may point to something else. So tying this into world peace and the transformation in our world that I believe is already started quite a while ago, and the seeds were planted a long time ago. Actually, the seeds were planted from the beginning of the earth, but in this era, the seeds were planted a while ago. But we're getting to the part where there's a lot of momentum. And in fact, I've said this before, and I'll keep saying this, the peace is already on the earth. There's plenty of people who are in peace, and you can just join us. It's big enough that you can join us. And you start with inner peace, but you can also create peace in your homes and around. It's not missing, it's there. You just come in to that fold, okay? But that momentum will keep going until the whole earth will look like that. But it won't look like anything we saw before. Okay, the peace that we're going to have, and the prosperity that we're going to have, and the joy that we're going to have, and the oneness that we're going to have is not going to come from more of the governments we have, or more of the economic systems we have, or more of the educational systems we have. It's not going to come from all of those king's horses and men. You can't keep adjusting to make them better and get what it is we're looking at and hoping for in terms of world peace. You have to break that egg. You have to let it go. It's not going to come from that. There is nothing in government and politics and the problems that government and politics have created that you can fix enough to get a better solution. It's always going to be a cycle into all kinds of things that kind of structure and thinking and way of living results in. And I just use that as one example, but it's one of the bigger ones in all of our lives. We are all, at least nominally, subject to a government. I've withdrawn my consent from being governed by a state. I'll talk about that sometime in probably an entire series. But the only point, it doesn't matter if it's government or if it's like you, I don't know where it is where you're at, but in the United States, the education system has gone on in a certain ways, and actually the education system is not that old either, the way that it is right now. It's probably arose somewhere between the 1930s and the 1950s, the way that it is now, and with seeds back into the late 1800s. And before that, education was conducted quite a bit differently. For example, we didn't have public schools up until maybe the late 1800s. Some social reformers decided that everybody should go to school, public schools for children. Before that, there wasn't any. Your parents paid for a tutor or governors. There were private schools. Otherwise, you ran the streets and worked with your parents, that sort of thing, or worked in factories. Okay, so we invented what we have now, and maybe it worked in a lot of ways, But the answer for the future is not going to be to keep adjusting this system, to keep trying to make it be better teachers, better teacher pay, more money, more days in school, more curriculum, more... No, the whole thing needs to be wadded up and discarded. And I do mean that. You're like, all of it? Start over? So much energy? Yes. But at some point, things have to come down off the wall. There's a lot of energy. That is a splat. And I'm not saying there aren't easy ways to make transitions, because there can be. They don't have to be horrible transitions if we could do it. It's just most of us don't have the strength of spirit to have those kinds of transitions without a lot of brouhaha. But either way, if it's done with brouhaha or without brouhaha, the egg has to be broken to get what's inside of it, and it's not going to look anything like it did before. So when you're thinking about world peace, and I just used the educational system as an example, but any world peace or anything that relates to world peace is not going to come from the structures that we're still hanging on to. It's going to be completely different. Please know that, and please do it as a fun way. Like, be creative, be fun. What can we dissolve and get rid of? And a lot of that's already happening. You know, like our social medias, Google, Facebooks, for better or worse, there's a new structure coming in of how we govern things, and the state governments over the land is actually already loosening, because we're in the land of Google and we're in the land of Facebook, and people congregate and have loyalties in different ways based on even social media. Again, just an example about how things can just kind of all of a sudden change, and it's different. Okay? So my invitation is not to be afraid of that, and to find the joy in it and be excited about all the eggs that are going to break. And another really beautiful example of how this would work is actually a different food group, but I think it does almost bring a more beautiful way of thinking about the transformations that have to just aren't going to look anything like before. And I got this from Carolyn Myss, and she's talking about how an acorn, which is a seed, an acorn gets planted, and this actually is true of any seed, but the acorn isn't going to become what it is meant to be by just becoming a larger acorn or a better acorn. And sometimes that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to become better acorns. But the acorn is meant to become a mighty oak tree, and that looks nothing like the acorn. And this is true of any plant. The seeds have to be broken so that you can get to the stem and eventually the blossom, and then of course more seeds. There's an endless cycle there. But the blossom, the bloom, and the fruit don't look anything like the seed. And that's just the way the universe works. That's the way anything works. So try to ask yourself, if you're trying to make better acorns, or if you need to do something else, maybe it's just the way you think, may not be anything specific in your life. It could be, this could apply to your personal life as well. But let's start making room for letting the acorns stop being acorns, and any good that we could have gotten out of all the acorns we've planted, our government, our education, and that sort of thing, let's break them and let them be oak trees, something completely different. And that's how world peace is going to take place. So let's be open and have our eyes open and have our hearts open, and just be really creative with our actions. And that's how to groove for that. That's how to expect for that. So I'll see you on the other side, on the oak tree side. Bye-bye, acorn. Bye-bye, Humpty. Hello, fried egg.